Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out themichaeldukesshow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Well, across the world on the internet, yet again, and around the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or translator. Good morning and welcome to the program. It is the Michael Dukes Show. Good morning. We made it. We made it today. And thank you. Thank you for coming on board and being part of the show today. We appreciate it. Hump Day, middle of the week. I sat here yesterday in nearly impotent rage as I tried to get everything on for the program yesterday. Nearly 6 years now of broadcasting from the home studio and everything else. And yesterday was the first day where we were just unable to do it. Just unable to do it. No secondary option to get anything rolling. And oh man, was I upset yesterday. I'll be honest. It was a rough morning trying to get things going on. Apparently, and I say apparently because I only found out later because of course we can't get any real information on what's happening. Apparently, there was some kind of fiber optic cut between Anchorage and Eagle River and Wasilla, and there was absolutely no internet out in my neck of the woods. And since we utilize the show to transmit to the radio stations and everything else through a special radio station magic box that utilizes the internet, it became a real it was just a problem. It was just a real problem. Now, unfortunately, look, there's a lot of things to be said recently about the internet provider GCI in the state. They've had some black eyes here recently. They've had some real problems. That being said, I will say that when I first signed up for them here where I was at, they were godsends. They had the best deal going ever, right? Before that, I had caps on data and I couldn't get it and it was more expensive. It was a hot mess until I got signed up with GCI, and then they gave us what was supposedly the fastest connection in the state. And I've been happily rolling along for, 4 or 5 years now. But recently, man, I got to tell you, I spent, what was it, last year? They decided to outsource all their technical support and everything else. And ever since then, stuff has just gone downhill. Yeah. And by the way, the president of GCI, back 4 or 5 years ago, decided to lobby against Alaskans getting a PFD, which I thought was, that was some hubris right there for sure. But anyway, it was an exemplar of how frustrating it was yesterday, right after 6 a.m. when the show was supposed to be on the air and I still had no internet. I called GCI tech support because they weren't open before that. They don't open till 6 a.m., which fantastic. And then I was on hold for 30 minutes. I never talked to a human being for the first 30 minutes until I got some lovely young lady somewhere, South America or something, who proceeded to jump me through a bunch of hoops for 5 minutes before finally telling me, oh yes, they have, she called it a statewide outage. It was only localized to the apparently to parts of Wasilla and Eagle River, but she called it a statewide outage and had no answer as to when it was going to be fixed. But they were working on it, she assured me. They were working on it. 4 or 5 hours later, the internet did return to the studio. But I mean, the ultimate in frustration. I mean, why GCI used to be when you used to call the tech support number, it would tell you right at the beginning of the recording if there was a known outage going on, right? Well, that would have saved me a half hour of my life if they just keep those recordings on the front saying, hey, there's a known outage in the Wasilla, Eagle River area or whatever. And it just proves yet again that what we really need is more competition. Now, I mentioned this the other day. I do have a Starlink. I was on the Starlink beta program, and the box has been sitting here in my office since before Christmas. And I have not hooked everything up yet because I knew from reports of friends who have it and from the acknowledgement of Starlink itself that the coverage is not yet complete for the Starlink satellite network to be able to do it. So I haven't put it up yet because I knew that there was intermittent problems. But at least if I'd had that yesterday, we could have been on with maybe a few interruptions or something. So looks like this weekend I might be spending part of the weekend assembling the Starlink thing and getting everything, just at least to have a backup, at least to have a secondary chance of making something happen. So, yep, we're working on it. And it's amazing how dependent we have become on the internet for so many things. You're only reminded of that when your internet finally goes out somewhere, and it's definitely an eye-opening experience to say the least. I mean, I still had internet on my phone yesterday morning through whatever the 5G network or whatever, so I was at least able to post a comment on Facebook to let people know that we were down for the morning. But yep, that was yesterday. So now we're putting our thinking caps on and we're putting more redundancy in. And I've got my remote backup gear that we can pull out now because I had it sitting on my desk down in Anchorage at the radio station instead of here at home where it belonged. So I couldn't even use my remote gear to do it. So anyway, we're going to have a couple backups. So hopefully that doesn't, I mean, once in 6 years, I guess it's not a bad track record if once in 6 years something like that happens, but ooh, baby, it is frustrating. It is so frustrating when it happens, especially when I've got some great guests to talk about things that are going on all over the place. And yeah, I mean, I agree. Anthony in the chat room just said, all I'm saying is a multi-billion-dollar communications company's infrastructure should not be able to be taken out by one guy with a pickaxe. I couldn't agree more. I mean, really, you guys are you're the biggest player in the state, and some guy with a shovel, cut off, 15% of your customer base. That's a problem. So anyway, I'm not going to complain about it anymore. I mean, I was super hot about it, but here we are. We're back at it. We're ready to go, and we're ready to dive into it. The good news is, I was able to talk. Yesterday's guests into coming on today. So just pretend, for the sake of the show, that today is Tuesday, because today we're going to start off with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. He's going to be joining us here in just a few minutes for the weekly top 3. We're going to be talking with Brad about everything that's going on and all the good stuff that's happening and everything else. So that's going to be kicking off here in just a moment. And we'll be covering a handful of things, including what we learned the first time through the Legislative Finances Overview of the Government Budget, the thing that surprised Brad about the pre-filed bills, and the question about the governor, is Dunleavy really serious about protecting the PFD? those are really going to be the top three things that we can talk about today with Brad Keithley. Then in hour 2, we're going to be joined by Chris Story. I'll be doing a little bit of a recap, and we'll see what happened there. And then Chris Story will be coming on board for our weekly Uplift, our positivity update. So we got it all. That's it. That's right. So it's going to be fun. At least we didn't miss out on this week's weekly dose of the weekly top 3. So that's what's coming on this morning. All right. So I got just a couple minutes here. So many stories. Scott Kendall still trying to get David Eastman thrown out of the legislature. That's one story. The swearing in of all the senators. Mike Shower is got something going on. Don't know exactly what, but he was not at the swearing in yesterday. Meanwhile, the House just basically broke it off on Mike Shower, Shelley Hughes, and Rob Myers, and they were pretty much shut out of all committees. Rob Myers was the only one that got assigned to a sitting committee, and that was transportation. Both Shower and Shelley Hughes ended up at special committees. I mean, that's just a poke in the eye as far as that goes. I don't even know what to say to that. That's like basically they just shamed him and put him in a corner and said, shut up and sit down. Should they even bother to show up at that point? Then we had the interesting things happening yesterday in the House side of things, where there was some sneaky stuff going on. And what? So the first thing was, and this was reported differently, both in the ADN and Must Read, but it was interesting. Word was that somehow Soldotna Representative Justin Ruffridge had made some kind of deal with the Democrats to install him as Speaker Pro Tem. And that rumor, according to Suzanne Downing, must be in the correct category, because no sooner had the representatives gavelled in and been gavelled in by the lieutenant governor, Democratic Representative Andy Josephson of Anchorage nominated Ruffridge for the Speaker Pro Tem, the temporary position that they needed to make sure that the legislature can organize. There was an immediate at ease. An immediate at ease was called. And then when it was all said and done, Laddie Shaw nominated Representative Josiah Patkatak from Uktavic, who won the election of Speaker Pro Tem in a 40-0 vote. Even David Eastman voted in favor of Patkatak. The Ruffridge nomination never even went to a vote. It was DOA. Patkatak has served as the Speaker Pro Tem for the last, last session. This is the second time that he served as Speaker Pro Tem. He's seen as a guy who can basically wants to be part of either majority, and he seems like a pretty common sense guy. He's an independent from Uktavic, and he's seen as one of those guys who might be willing to cross the aisle in either direction, kind of more the moderate middle of the road, just wants to make sure that his people are represented, which is an interesting position. And I think we might talk a little bit more about that as we go through, but that was kind of the stuff that happened yesterday. Just the first little thing that now Ruffridge has been quoted on this program, in the newspaper, and more, that he wants to be with a majority of Republicans. And it was that's where he wanted to be, was with a Republican majority. And so I don't know what's going on. But it's interesting to watch. He said that even the paper quoted him, ADN quoted him as saying that he is interested in serving in a coalition, quote, with a majority of Republicans. But Josephson said Democrats and independents in the legislature see Ruffridge as, quote, moderate and sensible and responsible. I don't know exactly what that means. I don't know, I don't know how to read through that. Anyway, interesting conversation. We'll find out more about what's going on with that as we go through. But the House is now adjourned until today, 10 a.m. today, I believe. They wanted to adjourn till Thursday, but Eastman said, no, we got to get the work done. So we'll see what happens. The Michael Duke Show continues. We got Brad Keithley coming up. We'll return with more right after this.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Okay. Oh, man. What a day. I had to laugh because what did I just see in the chat room? I was talking about the GCI and trying to figure out what was going on. And Chris in the chat room was like, on Twitch, was like, well, you could have asked Chad. I was monitoring the outage yesterday. I couldn't get into chat. I had no internet, man. That's the chicken and the egg thing right there. I mean, you could have just asked the chat, except for there was no chat. Oh, my God. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there. All right. I suppose we should pull things together here. Brad Keithley is in the green room. We'll see what he brings to the table this morning. Let's go over here. Good morning, my friend. How are you doing this morning?
Michael, I'm doing great today. How about, well, I'd ask how about you, but I think we all know now how you're doing.
Yeah, I'm doing okay. Better than yesterday. Let's just put it yesterday. Yesterday was exercise and total frustration.
Your best line in the morning is, even David Eastman voted for Josiah Attack.
I know. Even David Eastman, who's normally so contrarian that it just you can't stand it. Even he went ahead and did his thing this morning. All right, so we're ready to dive into all this stuff. It's gonna be interesting. Use the smartphone to talk to chat. I have to initiate the chat from the main computer, Chris. I love you, man, but seriously, I have to initiate. Everything is run from the regular computer. I can join the chat from my phone once the main computer has got it all set up. It doesn't matter. I just doesn't matter.
Just completely write off yesterday. Forget it ever happened. Today's Tuesday. Here we go.
Pretend like it never happened. That's exactly where we're at. All right. Any comments here quickly? We got about 3 minutes here. Any comments on the organization that you saw yesterday? Anything that you're thinking about here? I'm curious.
No, I was really surprised, quite frankly, on the referendum vote. I don't know or the referendum nomination. I don't know what to make of that. I mean, Will Stapp, I would have understood. But referendum, I'm a little surprised at. And I, for him to, I assume that he agreed to let Andy put his name in nomination, and I assume they thought they would have 21 that way somehow. I mean, you usually don't go to the floor with something like that, particularly where you're exposing somebody without having your ducks lined up. So I'm not quite sure what to make of all that. It got papered over quickly.
I mean, the immediate at ease followed by the nomination of Pat Katak was like, woof, man. But it does raise, my question is this them? Maybe he didn't want to play ball, and so they decided to throw him under the bus and make him look bad, or was this, you know what I mean? I mean, are they trying to sow dissension, or was there something legitimately going on there? I don't know. I have no idea. But
that's pretty cruel. And if I had been Ruffridge and they'd done that to me, I would have let that be known in the press.
No, I mean, I definitely would have been upset about it. But I don't know, man. It's just I feel like I want to take a shower by the time this whole thing's over,
Well, wait, we got a lot of months left to go, so I'm not sure I'd head for the showers yet.
It's already started. I just want to get the stink off me, you know what I mean? It's already started. All right, Brad. Well, we're ready to dive into the weekly top 3, and we're gonna do it to it. Should be interesting. 20 legislators are brand new right now, And that it's going to be a hot mess. I can't wait to see. They're talking about all the whispered conversations after they adjourned yesterday in the hallways with the newbies and the old bees and the whole thing. And I could see the powers that be are cracking the whip, trying to maintain control.
I tell you, the name, the person to keep watching is Craig Johnson.
Craig Johnson.
He comes out of the Chenault, trained by Chenault, and and he's going to position himself somehow.
We're going to see what happens there. Brad Keithley, our guest, The Michael Duke Show. Here we go. Good morning and welcome back to the program. We're continuing now with the Michael Duke Show. Broadcasting live across the state of Alaska. We've got Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets on board with us this morning. Normally our Tuesday gig, but since we lost a whole day there, Brad was kind enough to agree to come in today and talk with us and get things started. We were just talking about the organization of the Senate, of the House, rather, and everything else, and what a mess that's going to be. We'll see how that plays into Brad's top three discussions. So good morning, Brad. How are you doing?
Michael, I'm doing great today. It's good to see you. It's a bright and shiny Tuesday morning. We're just going to play like yesterday never happened.
We're just going to pretend like today is Tuesday. Oh, that's going to screw some people up right there. I can tell you that for sure. Well, Brad, let's dive right into it. Let's start off with number one of the weekly top three. What have we learned the first time through the Legislative Finances overview of the governor's budget? Let's start and take a crack at that.
Well, Legislative Finance, in advance of the session, publishes a summary of the governor's budget, and it's always interesting reading. For those who haven't read it before, you can find it on the LegFin website, legfin.com. It's always a useful analysis to sort of confirm things that you think you're seeing in the governor's budget, or to identify things that you really haven't noticed in the governor's budget. It also is useful to sort of identify the perspective that legislative finance, but remember that legislative finance is run by the Senate Finance and the House Finance Committee chairs. In the absence of a House Finance Committee chair, guess who's in the ear of the legislative finance director. It's always interesting to see what they're trying to sell by using legislative finance early in the session. And this year they're sort of selling the same thing early on in the document. They're sort of selling the same thing they've been selling for the last 5 years now, which is that permanent fund dividend money is UGF, is unrestricted general funds, and that permanent fund dividends are spending. And so you compare them in the legislative finance document when they do what they call the swoop chart, which is the highest categories of spending by agency and other categories. They put the PFD in there, so it looks like it's competing against these other categories of spending, and they've continued that. Legislative finance, it's always interesting to me, because legislative finance essentially, though they don't say it, but they always admit that in their documents that treating the PFD as UGF, revenues that are designated for the PFD, treating those as UGF, unrestricted general funds, commingled funds that you can use for any purpose. They always admit that that's a lie. There's a footnote in their fiscal summary that says that talks about restricted revenue and designated funds, and it says designated funds, which are DGF, a separate category from UGF. Designated funds include funds, and then there's a category 2, funds that are designated by statute for a specific purpose. The revenues designated by statute for a specific purpose. Well, there's no clearer designation of funds for a specific purpose, revenues for a specific purpose, than the PFD statute. But they just ignore it as if that statute doesn't exist, and recategorize the permanent fund revenues designated by statute for the permanent fund dividend, just recategorize those as UGF. So it starts off with the usual sales pitch that since the time Natasha, you got to figure out how all this ties together. Since the time Natasha went on the Senate Finance Committee, it keeps selling that same line that they set it up, that she set it up for originally. I've always wondered, I had wondered when she left the legislature whether they would change their tune, but they haven't. It's still UGF. Going through the document, there's a couple of things that I think are significant. Again, thinking about this from the perspective of what legislators, what the chairs of the Senate Finance Committee, again, because there's no House Finance Committee yet, what the chairs of the Senate Finance Committee are trying to sell through legislative finance. There's a summary at the beginning, and about a third of the way through the summary, there's a headline that says "The End of Alaska's Austerity Era." It has a question mark, but it essentially, the argument in that section is that Alaska's austerity era, the era of cuts, is over, and that we've sort of put that behind us, and now we're going to spend. A couple of fact items in there that I found significant. Talking about last year's budget, or last session's budget, which was a combination of the FY23 budget and the FY22 supplemental. These items, totaling $602 million, contributed to a ballooning statewide items figure above. Now, keep in mind the budget's broken down into the operations budget, the agency operations budget, statewide items, and capital. And this is talking about the statewide items. These items, totaling $602 million, contribute to the ballooning statewide items figure above, but the growth rates would still be unsustainable without them, even excluding these items. And they're talking about one-time items, what the governor described in his budget message when he issued the few vetoes he did and signed the budget. Even excluding these one-time items, the pre-PFD budget would still have increased by 23.1%. And so they're using that as sort of the kickoff fact for the fact that we've reached the end of the austerity era. Then they go to talking about the governor's budget, and it says, overall, the governor's budget proposes relatively few major changes to agency budgets. The most significant change is a proposed increase to Medicaid of $20.7 million for a combination of expected utilization and inflationary changes, as well as to expand postpartum coverage. So again, with the theme of the end of the austerity era, building that up as the theme, that we put that past us now. In talking about the governor's budget, they emphasize that the governor's budget has very few changes, and where there are major changes, it's to increase Medicaid spending, of all things. One of the things that we've talked long and hard about being an area that you could decrease, but the governor's budget increases.
So I just want to interrupt real quick to say, so you're saying their justification for more spend is the fact that they have spent more.
Yes.
That's the justification for future spend is, look, we've already increased, so why bother to go back? Essentially is what you're saying. Because look, we just increased by 23%, so we should we should stop, is what you're saying. Stop trying to.
Well, we have stopped. I think what they're trying to do is state it as it's sort of like in 2017 when they stated that the PFD is unrestricted general fund revenues. Thank you very much. And we're going to compare it. The PFDs are state spending, and we're going to compare it to others. It's sort of like, we're going to say it so, and thus it is so, right? That's sort of the tactic of some of these ledge finance documents. If ledge finance, a bipartisan expert agency, if ledge finance says it so, it must be so. This comes out of the old David Teal era. If David Teal said it so, it must be so.
Right.
And so they're saying, well, end of the austerity era, look at these facts, it must be so.
Right.
And sort of try to win by assumption, right? Win by assumption and statement of fact that really isn't fact, but statement of assumption of fact. And then the governor goes on or the budget goes on for identifying other areas where the governor's budget increases. The governor's budget didn't get all of the tax credits, the oil and gas tax credits, reimbursable tax credits purchased last year because oil prices went down. So there's an additional sum now included in this budget, essentially a rollover, if you will, from the last budget into this budget of the purchase of the final oil and gas tax credits. And then talks about the capital budget. And the capital budget has increased over prior capital budgets. The 10-year plan now shows nearly $100 million increase from what prior capital budgets had shown on a going forward basis. And the LegFin explains that as the majority of the UGF and the governor's capital budget is used for federal match. 171.3 million of the 276.4 million total is for this purpose. This is $19 million increase from the FY23 budget. And then it increases in the out years as well. And basically what it's telling us is all of the federal money that's coming into the state, guess what? It ratchets up state money also, because in order to get that federal money, we have to have state match money, and that increases the state capital budget in order to do that. So there's one other thing that I think is useful. The like it did last year, the Ledge Finance document summary talks about revenues, additional revenues or new revenues. And it says the following options are reflective of common practice in other states, but do not constitute a policy recommendation. Equity, economic impacts, efficiency, and other considerations are not presented here, but should be addressed if the legislature chooses to explore revenue options. Well, here's another thing that happens as a result of moving the PFD to UGF and treating it as spending. The PFD cuts don't get included in this category. And so you've got a situation where you're looking at these other taxes and you're saying, generally people say taxes are bad, but you're not comparing them to the PFD because they've moved the PFD over to the spending category by including the revenues in UGF.
And they're not including the economic impact of that, essentially.
Right. They avoid that issue entirely through the trick of treating the PFD as part of UGF and not treating it as an alternative revenue source and comparing it to other alternative revenue sources. The final thing in here that I think is worth noting is a confirmation, basically a confirmation of some of the calculations we've been doing. It says Ledge Finance estimates an individual income tax based on AGI, adjusted gross income, a flat income tax of 3% with no exemptions or deductions would generate $900 million in the first full year administered. So basically, they're saying the same thing we've been saying, which is you could solve the deficit that we've been solving by this hugely regressive PFD cuts could be solved instead through a 3% flat tax. And I found some comfort. I don't recall seeing that in last year's document. I found some comfort in the fact that their calculations are lining up with our calculations, and that we're both showing about that the number we ought to, some people talk about, oh my God, there'd be a 10%, 12% income tax. That'd be horrible. Well, the number we ought to be talking about is a 3% flat tax. That's the comparable number to the heavily regressive PFD cuts that the legislature has been adopting the last few, and the governor's been signing the last few years. So I found that to be a useful number.
Two things to continue to contribute to this before we run out of time. First, Donna Ardwin's in the chat room. She says, Brad, did you notice the report says it makes no difference whether the PFD is paid out of the ERA or the general fund, that there's a forced disconnect, and that seems to be embraced now, that no longer are they wanting to pay it out of the ERA and general fund. And that, again, just continues to reinforce that separation between the actual dividend and the fact that they're saving it as general fund money.
They've been saying that all throughout. That was part of the 2017 change, that it's not designated funds, and it makes no difference the source of the funds. It's UGF spending.
And Brian in the chat room says, for those of us who aren't as brilliant as yourself, please place this into some sort of context and explain how this is fixable. How do we fix it? I mean, you're giving us a lot of good details here, but dumb it down. Talk to me like I'm 5, and then tell me how to fix it. I mean, that's where we're at right now.
Well, the fix is what we've been talking about all along, which is to treat the PFD as designated funds, either statutorily designated, which is what they are, or constitutionally set them aside, but treat them as the funds designated for special purposes they are. Once you do that, you see what the remaining UGF revenues are and what the fiscal gap is, the remaining fiscal gap that the state has to close. And then by treating them as designated funds, bringing them from designated funds into UGF to supplement UGF would be treated as a revenue. And then you compare them to all the other revenues. And you see that the PFD is, as ICER told us in 2016, as ITEP told us in 2017, and as no one has said any different since that time, you see that using PFD cuts to close the gap has the largest adverse impact on Alaska, on 80% of Alaska families, and on the overall Alaska economy. So that one trick, that happened, I'll just say contemporaneous with Natasha joining the legislature. That one trick of moving the PFD over to unrestricted general funds and treating it as spending, that one trick, undoing that sort of unlocks, getting at the correct solution, seeing the true fiscal gap unadulterated by the diversion of PFD funds, and then comparing the use of PFD funds to close that gap against alternative revenues.
Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We got to run. We got number 2 coming up. We'll be back with more. The weekly top 3 right after this. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Brian clarified and said, no, that was a Harold question. It wasn't for Brad. But, it's still, I think, good to break it down for some of us because we get into some deep level stuff right here on the program every Tuesday. But, that really is the crux of this whole problem. And I think we've talked about it before, but you're just highlighting it again, Brad. The second that they stopped treating the PFD like it was a designated, fund, like the original intent was, that it had first call, that it was simply a pass through. It was not a revenue, any of those things. That was the beginning of the end for the permanent fund dividend as we know it, because that changed everything. Then it had to fight on some kind of equal playing field, and it became the cookie jar that everybody wanted to put their hand in.
Yeah, the second they treated all of the earnings reserve funds coming to all of the permanent fund earnings reserve coming to the budget. The second they treated all of those as UGF, and the second they included the PFD in the swoop chart. And for those of you who are interested in what the swoop chart is, go to the legislative finance website, look for their summary of the governor's budget. And then the swoop chart sort of looks like a swoop. It starts with the highest spending categories. I guess I need to get down to get in the frame. Highest spending categories, and then swoops down to the lowest spending categories. The second they put the PFD in there, what happens is the PFD just dwarfs everything else. And it looks like it does exactly what Natasha wanted. It makes it look like the PFD is the source of the state's fiscal problem. She couldn't change the law. They couldn't change the PFD statute. And so they just ignored it and just started making crap up about what the budget looked like, ignoring the PFD status as a designated revenue source. Teal was part of that deal. Bert was part of that deal. Natasha was part of that deal. Neil Foster, though he'll now deny it, was part of that deal in order to set up the budget that way. And everything they've built since then, every justification for cutting the PFD, every justification for funding it from other unrestricted general fund sources, because after all, it's just unrestricted general fund spending. Everything they've done since that time stems from the 2017 decision to treat it as unrestricted general funds and to put it in the swoop chart. So yeah, that's the source of the problem, and then everything builds from that. And now this year, the assumed fact is that we've hit the end of the austerity era. No. I mean, the governor's budget sort of tells you that too. If the only major action in the governor's budget is to increase Medicaid spending, you know that battle is we're losing that battle big time.
Right.
But to just state as fact, end of austerity era, end of the Alaska austerity era.
Yeah, and I have to laugh. Austerity. I mean, okay. I mean, largest budgets, you just look at the ever increasing amounts of budgets. Yeah, there's a lot of austerity baked into that thing. And they've been telling us for 6 years they just can't possibly cut anything else out of the budget. Sure, we've had a lot of austerity. I mean, it's just what they want is just unrestricted spending. That's what they want.
I mean, the theme this legislature is going to be on K through 12 spending. We're going to hear it over and over and over and over, which is we have had K through 12 cuts. The failure to include an inflation adjustment is cutting K through 12 spending. And we're just going to hear that until, we're nauseated by it. But that's going to be the theme, that we have had cuts. And now that we've gotten to this point, it's the end of the austerity era. Yeah, we don't have big oil revenues anymore, but look, we got this whole bunch of PFD money that we're now going to treat as unrestricted.
Well, and Rob Meyer says the end of austerity during falling oil prices. I mean, that's, that makes a whole lot of sense. And then Donna chimes in again, even using their own SB 26 law, the only part of the ERA that should be in the UGF is the amount of the POMV left after transferring the statutory amount to the dividend. But they continue to ignore that. I mean, why even bother having laws, Brad? Because they're going to do whatever the hell they want. That's kind of the whole thing. Hashtag follow the damn law. Nope, doesn't work.
And part of the key to that is controlling ledge finance, because ledge finance, I mean, if you read the news reports and you follow the reporters, they all sort of treat ledge finance as God, right? As the nonpartisan expert body. So he who controls ledge finance controls the world, basically, is what's going on here. And I know that OMB has tried to beat that back, especially when Donna was head of OMB. And I know Revenue has tried to beat that back, but they don't do a very good job at it. I mean, last year or the year before, that Bert's first question out of the box to Neil Steiner, the successor OMB director, was, do you agree that there's a conflict between SB 26 and the PFD statute? The answer to that is no, I don't agree that there's a conflict. Steiner's answer was yes. And once you do that, once you agree to that, you just go down a slippery slope.
Brad Keithley, our guest. Here we go. All right, we're continuing now. Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top three. We're on to number two. I don't know if we get to number three. We're going to try our best. Number two is the surprises. Brad said there's some interesting things to learn from the pre-files with some surprises in there. Brad, what say you?
The surprises were by omission. There were very few fiscal policy bills included in the pre-file. Wielechowski had his usual constitutional amendment to constitutionalize the PFD. But all of the other fiscal policy pre-files that I could find were basically versions of spending caps. None of the pre-file bills appeared to be embodiments of the proposal put forward by the Fiscal Policy Working Group to the multi-pronged solution, as they call it, the comprehensive solution to the state's fiscal issues. None of the bills seem to capture that. The only fiscal policy bills, other than Wielechowski's PFD amendment, it was spending caps. Of the spending caps, the one that appears to be the one to follow closely is Jim Kaufman's former representative, now Senator James Kaufman's proposed spending cap that is based on GDP. It sets the spending cap at a certain percentage of GDP. And basically, because the Alaska GDP is driven so much by oil prices, oil values. I mean, that's our biggest export, right? Oil. And so that's, the value of the exported oil really drives the GDP. Really, it's an indirect way of setting the spending cap based on oil values, oil prices. And I say that's the one that appears to be the one to follow, because Gary Stevens, at some point, either in the Senate majority press availability yesterday, or in a separate conversation, said to the KTUU reporters, right, that he's intrigued by Kaufman's bill and thinks that that's one that the legislature, the Senate at least, will take a close look at. I've got problems with Kaufman's bill. I mean, it's like all of the other bills that aren't related to actual revenues, right? It has the ability to sort of spin off on its own over time as revenues, as we know, traditional revenues are going down as oil prices go down. That would sort of follow it because being based on GDP, it would follow oil values, but it wouldn't follow it very closely. And so as traditional revenues would go down, spending would sort of continue bouncing along, and the gap between the two, just like we talked about last week, would expose, create this cage match, this MMA cage match, where there'd be the PFD and other spending categories that would fight it out, while the top 20% stood on the outside laughing all the way to the bank. So I was surprised by the failure of anybody to really try to put together a package and get that out there in front for discussion.
Well, and I think that's the problem with many of these spending caps is, either they're statutory, which means they can just ignore them as they have in the past. They've passed spending caps and then busted them in the same session, or it's so disconnected from the actual revenue in the state that it becomes, within just a handful of years, it becomes irrelevant and means nothing. And that's the danger here, is they want to look like they're doing something, but in the long run, it doesn't do anything to fix the actual problem.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. What the real concern I have about all this focus on spending caps is that what people are going to say is, well, we did a spending cap. We passed Kaufman's or we passed somebody's. We did a spending cap. Now we've solved the fiscal situation. Let's go on. Well, no, you haven't, because you've just set the PFD up for a cage match with other spending. You haven't solved the fiscal problem. You've solved it for the top 20%, because now they've got spending cap. They don't have to worry about spending rising to a level where you have to go get other revenues, but you just left the PFD out there exposed to being used as the funding source for the increasing budget gaps that we're going to be experiencing. So it's, you've hit the nail on the head. It's let's do, they're trying to set it up to say, let's do one thing and claim that we've solved it all, and they haven't. And so that's the real problem that we're facing here.
All right, number 3 quickly here. We got about 4 minutes. Is Governor Dunleavy serious about protecting the PFD? I guess that's the big question here. It would look like it on the surface since he proposed a big $4,000 PFD, but is he really serious about protecting it?
Yeah, exactly right, Michael. And here's where that question arises. We know even his 10-year plan says there's going to be continued deficits, right? What's the revenue source he's proposed to fill those deficits? Well, it's the pie in the sky carbon credits. And there's one headline in the Wall Street Journal today that just captures everything about carbon credits. It says many companies are shying away from carbon credits. So just at the time the Governor Dunleavy is trying to sell these as the be all and end all, as the solution to the state's fiscal problem, we get a Wall Street Journal headline that says, "Yeah, not so fast. Companies are are running the other direction from them. It's a fake revenue source. And without putting forward a real revenue source to fill in what we can see are going to be the continuing fiscal gap, all he's doing is exposing the PFD to additional cuts, deeper and deeper and deeper cuts. So, from a very real angle, and I'm writing this for this week's Friday column in the Landmine, from a very real perspective, Dunleavy's putting on a good face, sort of, by saying we're going to have $4,000 PFDs, we're going to pay a full statutory PFD. But when you pull that up and look underneath about what's supporting that, there's nothing there. It's fake revenues. So I really question at the end of the day whether Dunleavy is really supporting the PFD. If he was, he'd be looking at further spending cuts as opposed to $20 million increases in Medicaid, and he would be looking at a real revenue sources, and he's got plenty out there. His Department of Revenue has told him where they are, at real revenue sources that would help fill the gap without exposing the PFD to it. So there's a real question in my mind whether Dunleavy honestly, truly is supporting the PFD when it comes right down to it.
Well, because now he can kind of wash his hands, right? Oh, I've done it. I've put it out there, and now it's on the legislature. So in some ways, he's kind of passed the buck by trying to do it, but really giving them no other out other than to cut the PFD. I mean, because these fictional carbon tax credit revenues, which may or may not appear, and especially probably won't appear to the degree to which he says, he's kind of, shielded himself from that kind of criticism in that way.
We need to go back to the fiscal year 20 or the fiscal year 21 Dunleavy. In the fiscal year 21 10-year plan, Department of Revenue or OMB 10-year plan, it talked a lot about a balanced approach, some spending cuts, some alternative revenues, and PFD restructuring to POMB 50/50. Adding those three together, a little bit from each, taking a little bit from each category, in order to fit together a plan. That was the FY21 Dunleavy 10-year plan. Now the FY24 Dunleavy plan is no longer that. Forget that. We're just going to rely on fake revenues, and we're going to say that it balances out there through all these fake revenues without having to do PFD cuts. We need him to go back to the governor he was, as opposed to this mealy mouthed governor that he's becoming in the second term.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate you coming on board.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
We got more coming up. Hour 2 dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio. It's just another example, Brad, of, again, they say one thing. It's like the pod people. They go down to Juneau and they forget what they were what they were pointing out. And I'm if you really, really meant it, and now you're a lame duck, you could do whatever you want, essentially. You may face a recall, but you're a lame duck. Now would be the time to get on, to get on top of this and really just, hammer down on it. And he didn't do it. He just again passes the buck, shields himself, and says, I'm doing my best, and not threatening to use the vetoes, not really putting out an aggressive budget. It's so frustrating to watch.
It is, Michael, and he's got it. I mean, he had it in the fiscal year 21 10-year plan. He had the solution. It's the same solution that 2 years later, the legislature's fiscal policy working group came up with. A little bit of this, a little bit of PFD restructuring to go to POMB 50/50, a little bit of spending cuts, nothing huge like he proposed in the initial year, but some spending cuts, and a little bit of additional revenues. And of those additional revenues, a portion of it could come from things like fixing the Hillcourt glitch, which is about $100 million, and some adjustments to oil taxes to bring oil taxes up to current standards, and then a little bit of additional revenues on the side. It's like I don't want to, Dunleavy is. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about additional revenues unless they're painless revenues, like these
Right.
fictional carbon credit revenues. Then I'll talk about them all day long.
Right.
And, and I'll put huge numbers on it, but I don't want to talk about real things.
Right.
And he did that. They did that. The administration did that. The FY21 fiscal plan. And we're just, now he's wandering off in some direction that, I don't know. And the end of austerity era, and the beginning of the elimination of the PFD era is basically where we're wandering off to now.
Yeah, no. And that is frustrating, especially since we've talked about things like, the Hillcorp thing and additional taxes, and a refreshing of the taxation on the oil company, taking and bringing some of that money to the table. Between those two fixes alone, you could have $400 or $500 million easily, and then other revenue sources that have been identified. But again, it has to be a holistic approach, like the Fiscal Policy Working Group said, and nobody really is talking about any of that. It's always a one lever solution.
Yeah, and there's reasons for that, I suppose. But I got to admit, I was really disappointed that we didn't see any of that in the pre-files. We only saw these single point solutions. We didn't see any of the comprehensive package that the last legislature. This was the last legislature that did it. And there are still those people. There are still people in that legislature that are in the Fiscal Policy Working Group that were reelected and coming back into the session. Nobody really bringing that together and putting that, laying that down as a groundwork. If they'd done that, if the governor had gone back to the FY21 10-year plan and said, "Look, we need a balanced approach. We need a little bit of here, a little bit of here, a little bit of here," we would have had both a legislative solution that some would have proposed, and the governor advocating that solution, and we could be talking about that. But now, we're having to talk about these fictional revenues coming from carbon credits that not even Wall Street buys.
Yeah.
So,
have you? Rob Myers in the chat room says Kaufman's cap and mine keep the PFD outside the cap. Both are also constitutional, not statutory. Have you had a chance to compare the two of them, Kaufman's and Myers, and taking a look at either one? Is there going to be some discussion on them?
Yeah, the discussion is going to be on Kaufman's because that's what Kaufman's in the majority, and that's what Stevens seems to be latched onto. I don't know if that was the deal for getting Kaufman in the majority or exactly how that came to be, but Kaufman's is the one. They keep the PFD outside the cap, but that really doesn't solve the problem. If you don't have additional revenues inside the cap, then where are you going to go for the revenues that are showing up inside, or for the fiscal gap, the deficits that are still showing up inside the cap. So even though you technically sort of keep them outside, they still get drugged back inside the cage because there's no other revenue source to be talking about.
Brad, we're down to the last minute here, so a minute and a half. What should we be looking for? What should we be watching? What are you going to be watching this coming week here as the organization continues and everything else? What should we be watching for?
I'm going to watch the House organization because the Senate clearly is going to go off on a tangent. They're clearly going to increase K through 12 spending. They're clearly going to do defined benefits, at least for teachers. And then, as we've said before, others will come in behind that. They're clearly going to do other things that I think have price tags on them. And so the House organization, and it doesn't look like Dunleavy's going to act as much of a barrier to if the Senate gets on a roll and has all these spending bills, it doesn't look like Dunleavy's going to act like much of a break on that. So I think really need to focus on the House organization and how the House comes together, who they put in charge of the Finance Committee, what policies they announce that they're going to have as a body, whoever organizes the House. I think that's become more critical than I first gave it importance because of Dunleavy's round, what we've talked about in the past is round heels, his willingness to sway back and just let the legislature do whatever it wants to do.
And Brian says, finally, sidebar, any music events we should be watching for, Brad?
Yes. There are a lot. Go to the Anchorage Concert Association. Laura Cortese and the Dance Cards is one heck of a group. They're appearing both in Anchorage and in Fairbanks. If you have a chance to go watch them. One of my favorite groups in music.
All right, Brad Keithley, thank you, my friend. Appreciate you coming on board and joining us. Thank you for being part of it today.
As always, Michael, thanks for having me.
Folks, hour 2 dead ahead, the Michael Duke Show. Let's go.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Across the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. It is the Michael Duke Show. Good morning and welcome to hour 2. If you're just joining us, thank you for being here and sorry about yesterday. Again, kind of out of my control. If you're just joining us, I told a little bit of the story yesterday, but we had a severe outage for the interwebs out here in the Wasilla area. And it's the first time in 5-6 years we've been broadcasting live from the home studio that happened. It took me completely and totally offline. I have a plan. For fixing this and hopefully making sure that in the future we won't have that. So I'm working on it. We're gonna see what we can do, and we'll do our best to make sure that next time it ain't so bad. We'll be on the air one way or the other. So we are working on it. I appreciate you coming in and sticking with us, and sorry about yesterday, and we'll try to avoid that in the future. Man, we've become so dependent on technology. It's just crazy, isn't it? Just crazy. Just finishing up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. And I definitely need our Chris Story break today. That was the other good news, by the way, was that we were able to ask the guest from yesterday to come back on today and be with us today, because I wanted to talk about. I needed that. I wanted the weekly top 3, and I definitely needed. I definitely needed an uplift and a PMA boost, which luckily Chris Story is going to be providing for us here in just a few minutes. We'll be picking things up with him in about 10-15 minutes, and it'll be nice to chat with him and get that. We're going to need that because, as you could see, based on our conversation with Brad, we're facing a pretty tough time. When the outlook and the the Ledge Finance Division and everything comes out and says the end of austerity, which is code for, well, we gonna spend now, baby. That's what it is. We're gonna spend now, and that's kind of the whole thing. I mean, look at every news story that comes out. There's a news story today from last night at KTUU, Alaska's news source, where they're again talking about the priorities of the legislature. The priorities include education spending and what they call a PFD resolution, a resolution to the PFD problem. They quote Senator Bill Wielechowski and others that are saying that the governor may have proposed a large dividend, but they expect that those numbers are going to change. And Bill Wilikowski said, we're going to have a robust discussion on what the dividend amount should be. Once again, we've had that every year, and hopefully this year we'll come to a solution on that issue. Alaskans want some stability. They want consistency, and I think they deserve that, and hopefully we can come up with some sort of solution that we can all agree on. I would venture to say that the solution is going to be a lower capped PFD. I mean, this is the Aurora plan, right? This is Natasha's Aurora plan, which was what, $500? That's your dividend. Have a nice day. The government's going to take the other $4,000 and spend it on whatever the hell they want to spend it on. And that's going to be this. This is when they use these code words like Alaskans want some stability, because they just couldn't possibly handle the fact that maybe the PFD goes up and down based on, a 5-year rolling average of everything and all that. They just couldn't possibly handle it. I mean, yeah, it's really irritating when the legislature sets it every year. But, prior to that, we knew that the PFD was going to go up and down. So it's not the stability that I think people are upset about. It's the fact that the government keeps taking a varying amount. But what you're going to see, I can almost, I would put money on this, Vegas style money, baby. I would put Vegas style money on this, that when they say things like Alaskans want some stability and they want consistency and hopefully we can come up with some sort of solution, what they mean is, well, we're going to set the price of the PFD. We're going to set the amount of the PFD and we're going to take the rest. That's what's going to happen. And it will not be a 50% of the PFD. I remember when we first started talking about the 50-50 POMV PFD, and then they countered with the 75-25. Remember that? Well, we know it's going to be even less than that, because if it's $1,000 PFD and the statutory formula says that it should be over 4,000, how much are we really getting out of that? I mean, that becomes more like a 85-15 or 90-10 split with the people. But you could already see it. That's when they talk about, taking care of the PFD issue, when they talk about resolving the PFD issue, that's what they're talking about. It's not, we're going to, the governor. And again, I agree with Brad's analysis that the governor here is just, he's playing politics. It's kabuki theater. Oh, yes, I will put a $4,000 PFD in the budget. Now, I know that there's no chance in hell of that actually getting through. And I know that I've built all these fictitious numbers for the revenue side just to make it all, pencil out on paper. But, it doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter. And that's the thing. And here's the other thing. Let's say that they set it at $500 or $1,000. I mean, let's just say that they set the PFD at $500 or $1,000, and that may go merrily along for a year, maybe two. But look at the deficits and the fact that they are now the end of the austerity era in Alaska, because we've just been starving ourselves. I mean, we've been so austere. So, but then, 2 years down the road, when the deficits continue, because there is no appetite for spending reduction, that $1,000 and that $500 is, they're going to be like, no, we told you and we promised you, but, we really need it, and we know better than you how this money should be spent. So even though we told you it was going to be 500 or 1,000 or 300 or whatever the number is, sorry, we're going to have to take that too. I mean, this is the eventuality of the politicians and the people who are in office right now, not necessarily the freshmen, the newbies, but the powers that be, the old guard who's in there running things from on high. I mean, Brad was 100% right. Basically, the finance committees control everything. And who do you have in the finance committees? Who's the people that are running that? The Bert Stedmans of the world, the Kathy Giesels of the world, the Click Bishops and the Neil Fosters and the Kelly Merricks of the world. I mean, who are they all beholding to? Remember that? Who are they all beholding to? So the PFD is essentially gone. In the next 5 years, maybe the next 10 years, if we can't reverse this somewhere down the road, if we don't reverse what's happening in the next 5 years, it's done. That's it. There will be no PFD. All of that money that was supposed to go to the people as their share of the revenue source, as their share as royalty, and as an owner state, all that money will be consumed by government. Period. And then what? Well, okay, take that a step further. Then what happens? Okay, they set it at 500 or 1,000. We coast merrily along for 1, 2, 3, maybe even 5 years, although I doubt we would get that far. Then they consume all that money. Now the PFD is gone. And then we fast forward another 2, 3, 5 years down the road. And then what do they say? Well, Alaskans really should be paying their way. They should really be paying their fair. We're all getting a free ride. Because we're not like anybody else. We don't have any all these other states have taxes. We should have taxes. They love to do that. Oh, well, we're not, we're doing all this other. And you know what? Alaskans should pay their fair share for the services that they're getting. I mean, am I wrong in my assertion and my analysis of that? Because that's all I can see right now. Based on the track record of what's going on, that's all I can see. Is that there is no will to push back on this. The few members that are in favor of this are out of favor. And the old guard continues to hold the positions of power inside the legislature and be able to run the show the way that they want. And it won't take long. Because even if when you take all of the PFD, that barely covers the deficit, folks. Even if you account for it the way that they want it to be accounted for as general fund and everything else, if they take the whole PFD, there is not much left over. You could be potentially looking at a call for new taxes in 5 years. And I can hear it now. I can see the headlines. I can see the subtitles and the subheadings in all these news articles that are being put out, with the help of the powers that be, the legislative, the majority and the old guard in there, because they've got the ear of all these reporters. You can see it. They almost use the news outlets as a mouthpiece for their own agendas. You can see it already. It will be Alaskans have got to pay their way. Alaskans have got to pay their fair share. I mean, I would bet real cash money that that's the language that you will see. Once the PFD is gone, once the PFD has been consumed completely by government spending, that shortly thereafter, you'll see the push for some kind of revenue tax, income tax, sales tax, whatever. And the argument will be, Alaskans, you need to pay your fair. We've been getting a free ride for too long. We need to pay our fair. I mean, regardless of the fact that at that point they're spending, by that time they'll be spending what, $18,000 for every man, woman, and child in the state? Monies that we never see because they're taken from us before. I mean, they never get a chance to hit our pocketbook to be able to turn in the economy or do anything. They go straight into government. And that's where we'll be. Oh, that's uplifting, isn't it? That just feels so good that's after, the last 20 years of fighting, this is where we're at. facing exactly the same problem with no solution because there are people out there who have become so dependent on the government, either on the, the lower income welfare side or on the upper income corporate cronyism side. That's where it is. It's just painful to watch. All right. Chris Story's going to join us here in a minute, and we're going to talk with him about, well, I don't know what we're going to talk with him about. Something. Positivity. We will be back with more. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. It is your home for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back with more and Chris Story right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Well, wow, I totally depressed myself in that little rant. I just totally depressed because I mean, that's where it goes. We get taxes. Then the PFD goes away and we taxes anyway. We get taxes anyway. That's the thing. That's 100%, Rob. They set the PFD to fix the problem, right? And it runs fat and happy that way for 24, 36, I mean, hell, I mean, I don't know, maybe even 5-6 years. And then they're like, oh, we just can't, no. Oh, ugh. And then, boom. They take all of it. And then even that's not enough. Because it's not Parkinson's. Parkinson's principle is what? When every available task consumes all available time. There's got to be an equivalent to that for, government and money, where basically government will just consume all available dollars. I mean, it's there. The whole thing is there, right? I mean, I don't know what the principle is or the law is, but it's there. There's a principle baked into that would just, there you go. Linda says, a very wise man said it's harder to get off government handouts than heroin. And that's the truth. I mean, and when we talk about government handouts, the first thing that comes to mind is, of course, the poor income, the low income people and people on welfare and things like that. And while that is true, how much in this state is consumed by government handout because that's their business model, right? Again, the GCIs and the construction companies and all the other people who bake their entire thing around government spending. I mean, I wish I had an answer for all that, but I don't. But maybe Chris Story does. I don't know. The man from Homer. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Michael Dukes, the Mengele of motivation.
The Mengele of yes, just me and the boys from Brazil. That's what it's all about.
Just destroying the motivation. I love that.
I mean, that's
it is. It's cyclical and it's frustrating. I'm sure you've watched this very, very closely for a long time. It's got to be frustrating to feel like, okay, you're making some momentum, and then like Sisyphus, the ball just rolls back down the hill. You got to start over.
Oh yeah, I mean, it is. Again, I've been fighting this for how many years have I been trying to, to stop this behemoth from doing its thing. How long have I tried to do this, and then to watch?
Well, just remember. A train is very easy to stop before it gets started, but once it's going, it's really hard to stop. So keep that image in your mind and just keep trying. talking to the brakeman.
Well, I
talking to
just
the
want
people
to
shoving the coal into the firebox.
screw that. I just want to blow the bridge. You know what I mean? Just blow the bridge.
But wait a minute, Michael, we're on the train.
Oh, well,
We're on the train. Remember?
maybe we'll survive. I don't know. Maybe we should blow the bridge anyway and watch it happen. I
Live
just,
on air.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, at this point, that's kind of where we're at, though, Chris. I mean, we're watching this go on, and eventually, the wheels will eventually come off the bus. Now, maybe not now, maybe 20 years from now, but we will be this whole state will be nothing but a government town. And then,
hey, if Keanu Reeves could stop the bus, so can Michael Dukes. Just pretend Sandra Bullock's on there, and you got to stop the bus.
Okay,
you can do it.
All right, I'll try. Don't go under 55 miles an hour, whatever you do.
That's right.
All right, Chris Story, what's your topic for today? Quickly.
What's your wealth blueprint?
What's your wealth blueprint? All right, I got it.
Boom.
Man, you better deliver today, man. I'm feeling kind of depressed all of a sudden. So you better, there's no pressure, but you better deliver today. All right. Chris Story is our guest. We're jumping back into it. The Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty based, free thinking radio. Like and share, like and follow. Let's go. Let's do it. Okay. Well, we're down to story time. Story time with Chris Story. Story time. He's going to read us a bedtime story and make it all right. Take care of all the monsters under the bed and make us feel better because, oh my God, I just depressed myself horribly in that last segment. But it's unfortunately, it's a kernel of truth. I can see it coming. It's like what was it, Chris? What about those old oracles and, the prognosticators who basically went crazy because they could see the future, but they couldn't do anything to fix it, kind of thing. And it just drove them insane. Kind of what I feel like here after the last 20 years.
All I request, and I think all your affiliate stations would request the same in your audience, is that if you do self-immolate, please do it on air.
Yes,
please.
It's true. Well,
make it a spectacle.
That's just good entertainment right there. That's what it's all.
Mm-hmm.
So when I get the gasoline in the match, you'll have a front row seat when that happens. All right, Chris. Well, you got a heavy lift today, my friend. You got a big heavy lift. Let's talk about it today. You want to talk to us about a blueprint, our wealth. What is our wealth blueprint? What are we doing for a wealth blueprint? And I don't know. I'm not a draftsman. I have a hard time drawing stick figures, so I don't know if I can draw out a blueprint. But Chris can help us. Tell us. Hit it, my friend. The floor is yours.
Well, good segue because the floor is where you start.
Dance,
and
monkey.
What's the floor on?
Dance, monkey. Dance. The dance floor is yours. Go.
The floor, by the way, Wayne Dyer said the whole point of dancing isn't to get to a certain point on the dance floor. It's to have a good time. So that's what life is about. And I think that's what I want to talk about today is your floor is built upon a foundation. Whose foundation? When it comes to your wealth or your money blueprint, whose foundation have you built your floor and your ultimate financial house upon? It may not even be yours. It may be a remnant from childhood. It may be actually handed down from your grandparents or great-grandparents. Depression era mindset or thinking may be still sort of the vestigial tale of your financial tale or your tale of woes if they are, or you may be repeating a pattern of wealth and abundance. Whatever it is, I suggest though, for true contentment, for true happiness, for true purpose-driven life, you identify this blueprint that you're following and make sure it's conscious, make sure it's on your terms, be it that you became a doctor, you became a lawyer, you became an accountant, you became whatever you are as a result of family pressure, or an expectation based upon a family, or, it's a residual of maybe this is what we've always done. This is, you're going to take over the family business, whatever it is. Make sure that what you're doing relative to your wealth blueprint is conscious and it's yours and it's set on your terms, because otherwise you will wake up at some point and maybe you'll have a full bank account and a retirement, or maybe not. But either way, if you're not content and you haven't enjoyed the journey, there's going to be something missing. So it's a matter, just sort of a wake up call and saying, am I following a blueprint that was handed to me, or am I following a blueprint that was drawn for me? If you buy a piece of property, for example, and it's already got a foundation on it, no home, but it's got a foundation, it's really tempting just to rebuild that house because it's cheaper than eradicating the foundation that's there and starting over. It's just cheaper. It's easier. It's simpler just to build upon what was there. However, it may not be what you want. It may not have been at all laid out the way you wanted. It may be designed for a full basement. I don't want a basement. I want 2 stories. I want to see the view. Whatever it is, make sure you're consciously following your own money, wealth, health blueprint. And this applies to anything and everything. Relationships. Are you following the old pattern and you're on your 8th marriage? Or is this your conscious way of moving through life and your relationship blueprint, your health blueprint, money, wealth, everything?
How about this just came to me, and you can comment on it, but how about the expectation?
I will.
I'm sure you will. How about the expectational blueprint? Because your parents have certain expectations for you, your friends, your coworkers, your family. Oh, Bob grew up and, mom and dad always wanted him to be a fill in the blank, lawyer, doctor, engineer, ditch digger, whatever they expected, high or low expectations. And that is like the blueprint that they hand you, but that's not one you can rip it up. You can draw your own blue. Your coworkers never expect you to move beyond where you're at. You could have other expectations other than the ones that the blueprints that people draw for you with theirs, right?
Absolutely. And there's that expectation, and then which is both negative and positive. I'll expect you're going to do completely different than us. We had nothing. You're going to have something, and that's put upon you, which is, hey, that's really great and well-intentioned by mom and dad. That's wonderful. And they've set you up now to really have a successful career or life and education, whatever it is. There's also then, of course, the expectation that you're gonna do like we do, and then we rebel from success, maybe because we want to rebel and individuate and be our own person and be individual, and then just unconsciously though are living the opposite side of that coin, which means maybe you ain't got no coin because you're rebelling or just repeating a pattern or repeating a cycle. I think it's a little bit like leverage, and I deal with this pretty regularly where I meet people whose parents, aunt and uncle, grandparents, or somebody they know closely as a child or what have you, over leveraged themselves, went bankrupt, went into foreclosure, lost their income property, lost something to a point where now this person's blueprint is somewhat predicated upon other people's experience in their periphery, and they're never going to do that. Like, I want to pay off my house as quick as possible. Okay, that's an option. However, what about the guy who I knew in 2005? I sold his home. He ran a 1-boat, 1-person charter operation, no deckhand, just him and his boat, and he retired with almost $2 million. How did he do it? He not in fishing. He did fine, supported himself and his family, did just fine, sold his boat for, who knows, $30,000, $40,000, whatever. The way he retired with nearly $2 million is having leveraged 5 condominiums in Anchorage at the lowest point of the market, held them for 25 years, sold them at the peak of the market, and walked away with an absolute fortune at a time when other people were running from those condos, running from those investments because the market had collapsed. So his blueprint, though, was I see an opportunity, I seize an opportunity, and he held on and he won. And so it just depends upon what is it that you consciously want to do, and are you sure you don't want to use leverage smartly, even though your family or friends or people have told you all the horror stories or what they've gone through? Are you sure you don't want to consciously build your own blueprint around some future fortune or future self that could be absolutely dynamic if you'd simply design your own blueprint. And it comes back to something that we've talked about on a couple of Tuesdays over the past number of years, which is self-analysis. Are you
Right.
sure? Are you 100% sure you know what you're doing? If you're consciously headed in a direction, fantastic. Expect detours and being off course a little bit along the way, but you have a blueprint you've designed to get you back to where you wanted to go and a destination you've aimed at.
Okay. So you know where I'm going with this. Obviously, you've already touched on it, the self-analysis. That's really where it seems like every Tuesday, that's where we end up at, is the analysis of yourself, your life, your goals. But all right, I got a blank blueprint sheet in front of me. How do I start? How do I start drawing that out? How do I start, sketching out the blueprint for, future wealth and ideas and success, et cetera, et cetera? Break it down for me, Barney style. Give it to me like, again, talk to me like I'm 5 and tell me how to make this happen.
Wait a minute, Barney Rubble or Barney the Purple Dinosaur?
I say Barney the Purple Dinosaur.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I love you. Just tell me how to do this, man.
I'm so grateful you did not go into the Teletubby realm because that's a whole other topic. I think it started at the beginning. That's where all good stories start, is at the beginning. And the blank paper that you just said, I think that's a good idea. But put on it an actuality of what is real today. Draw out your actual blueprint with words. What do you really think about money? What is your current income? What is your current net worth? What is your current debt? What is your current mindset? What do you think about money? When somebody says, here's an investment opportunity, be honest with yourself, kind of run through that. What's your first reaction? Oh, I would never. Oh, I don't dare. What do you think, I'm made of money? All these kinds of phrases and things that come back to you from childhood, or reactions you've got to your children or people in your sphere. How do you respond when somebody asks you for money, an investment, a donation, an increase in tax or whatever it is, or hey, we're going to have to hold off on increases in wages for a minute and whatever. Think about all those reactions. Think about your blueprint, write it down and look at it and be really honest with yourself. Is this who I want to be? Because you're going to be roughly sketching out your existence, your current situation, your circumstance. It's completely in your control to alter that circumstance. But if you don't know what or where you're altering it from, you don't know that foundation, or maybe you haven't even really consciously thought about, wait a minute, why do I grimace at the thought of a $500 cashmere sweater? What is going on there? Why don't I deserve that? Why do I feel like I need to buy something that is 88% off the rack, whatever? Why don't I have an investment property? Why aren't I the slumlord that I've always wanted to be? What's going on here? And just really look at those opportunities that are maybe you've taken advantage of or you've passed over. But I think it's really, Michael, just about a cold glass of water in the face and saying, okay, this is the reality. Am I happy with it? And I hope you are. And I really do, because this isn't a matter of saying, oh, you're going to find yourself measured short. No, you might just be, wow, I am so much further ahead than I thought, but I'm really glad that I'm now conscious of this and awake and aware, because I really want to design the next year, 2, 5, or 10, or 15 on my terms. And I want to know where I'm headed. And I think back to I had an incredible trainer in my mom and dad. They had full-time job. My dad had a full-time career, and at any given time, 2 side businesses, 2 side hustles before the term was even known. He had a construction business and they had an investment business, and they invested in businesses and real estate and apartments, and they built homes and apartments for people. All the while he had a full-time job and career. And so that was an incredible example. And he often said to me and my brother, pay yourselves first. Didn't have a clue what it meant. Didn't understand. Like, I don't know what he's talking about, but he keeps saying that, pay yourself first. It wasn't until I was in business for myself and I was using pre-tax dollars to invest for myself and my business that I understood what he meant. Pay you before you pay Uncle Sam. Pay you before you pay the light bill, etc. Because that's where you can grow your net worth. That's where you can grow wealth. And so coming to terms with that early on, I had fully admit, wow, what an advantage to have that mindset. I really appreciate it. And then I met a guy who handed me a book on real estate investment when I was 19. I had no high school diploma, no degree, no 6 degrees of separation from me and success. I couldn't see it. I didn't know where I was headed. And he handed me a book and a belief in myself and said, if you read this book, it's equivalent to a 4-year degree in real estate. I read it. I consumed it. I still read it to this day, 28 years or 30 years later, and absolutely love it and share it with as many people as I can. So I'm constantly revisiting. I'm not practicing. I'm practicing what I preach. I am constantly revisiting my blueprint, my plan, and where I'm headed. And this is just in January, mid-January. It's just a great time to stop and analyze this for yourself and determine and decide, where do I want to go? And am I happy with, and you might very well be happy with the foundation, the whole financial house you've built. And that's wonderful. But be conscious and be aware and be very forward looking and make sure it's where you want to go.
And just for curiosity's sake, for those out there who may not know, what is the name of the book that you received your 4-year degree in real estate on? What is the name of the book?
The Buy and Hold Real Estate Strategy by Dr. David Schumacher came out in 1991. It's still available on used copies. I don't think it's actually in print, but used copies are available through Jeff Bezos' little website.
Yeah, no, Jeff Bezos' little tinkering thing. Because I got a copy of it here a couple of years ago. Definitely educational for sure. What is your wealth blueprint, or what is just your blueprint for success in life? It's good questions. And again, this all comes back to self-analysis. What do we do? How do we roll? How do we make it work? Chris Story, the man from Homer, thank you for coming on board. Anything you want to leave us with quickly? 1 minute.
Yeah, I've got a free gift. It's called The Millionaire Maker. It's a practical guide, 6 steps to your first 4 homes. If you text me at 299-7653, your email address, I will send it to you in a PDF. It's about 35, 40-page manual on exactly how to get 4 homes in your life. And they're practical, easy steps, and real. And it's a literal blueprint of how we did it.
You have my address, and I notice I don't have one of those in my inbox. What the heck?
Send me a text, Michael.
Send you a text. All right. Well, I look forward. I actually haven't read that, so I look forward to sending you a text and doing that. Chris Story, the guy from Homer who comes in and helps us every week. Thank you, my friend, for being part of it. As always, good to hear from you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Give us that number one more time. Somebody's asking for the number one more time.
299-7653, 907.
All right. I posted it up in the chat room. We will see you next week. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Folks, we're out of time for today, for this segment, rather, not for today. And we'll be back with more. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense based free thinking radio.
It's the Michael Dukes Show.
Why not take a quick break?
Be right back. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
In the break, Chris Story is actually still with us this morning. Hello, my friend. Thanks for
Michael.
Thanks for holding on. It's always good. I guess last bite at the apple, my friend. People are asking for the number in the chat room, which I've posted in the chat room now so they can get it themselves. But this is the thing. There's only I was thinking about this the other day. You and I have many conversations off the air and talk back and forth and verbally abuse each other all the time. But the one thing that I keep thinking about is, you're right, because you keep talking about, the only true wealth in the long run, and especially is in the one thing that they're not making any more of, and that's land and property. And I love that. I think that it makes perfect sense. It makes it a lot easier to think about and consider. And I love that. I love that idea.
I had a conversation yesterday, Michael, and with somebody out of Chicago, and it doesn't matter who. I'm not going to name her name because it was a business conversation. I'll talk to you about it at a future point. But she said to me something profound. She said that in 1995, she had a conversation with Tony Robbins. She spent 4 hours with him because he was engaging her to consult on something that he wanted to do. with his business. And so she was brought in to consult him on it because that's her expertise. And they spent 4 hours together. And she said, he said something amazing. He said to her, I don't spend a lot of time talking about real estate investment and property. However, we know that it is the number one place to grow, develop, and keep wealth. And as soon as people make a fortune, they sink it into real estate. If they didn't make it in real estate, they put it there as quick as they can. And he said, Tony Robbins now saying this, I don't talk about that as much as you think I would, because I'm trying to help people unlock themselves first, because they have to get to a place where they can see themselves with wealth. They can see themselves in that place. But he acknowledged full on, this is where people make and keep wealth. And I just thought that was pretty fascinating, that this is, and it's a little known secret. It's a secret hiding in plain sight. We know it. We could look out the window and see right where you are. I don't care where you are. It's millions of dollars worth of real estate, literally just outside your window. You can see it. If you could see 4 homes, you can see well over $1 million worth of real estate in your literal backyard. And all you have to do is grab a piece of it.
Yeah, no, it's, I'll be honest with you, Chris, that whole idea, and I know you and I have talked about this, personally and things like that, but I still find that concept intimidating. I still find the concept of being a land baron or whatever you want to go, I still find that very intimidating from somebody who struggled in their early years, with money and everything else, and trying to make sure that we did the right thing and all that. And I still find it, a struggle sometimes to try and rationalize that in my mind, that, oh yeah, you can be a slumlord, a land baron, whatever you want to call it. It's something that I'm trying to overcome this year, because I know that that's where the long-term growth and the long-term stability is going to be from. And I don't know if you have any words of advice on that, but it's still a tough deal.
I do. Okay, perfect. I'm so glad you shared that, because you're not alone. You're not the only person that feels that way. Some people feel that block or that resistance towards writing their book, starting a business, getting into another relationship, whatever it is. And it's based a little bit on, I think, reflection upon your blueprint. So how about this? What if you exchange your blueprint, whatever's in your mind, Michael, that's holding you back, that's constipating your move forward? How about this? It's a game. I'm going to make this a game. I am going to be a player in this game, a role player in this game. I'm going to play the role of investor. What would an investor do, think, where, go, eat? How would an investor handle this? And then you're going to look at 100 properties in the next, call it 3 months. You will analyze and look at 100 properties, of which 10 will probably warrant a little closer look, of which 3 might pique your interest enough as an investor to actually go physically look and make an offer on one of them. And if you do that 100, 10, 3, 1 over the next, call it 6 months or a year, whatever you think is practicable and you can live up to, this is a game. You're playing a role, and the role is investor, and you're going to look at 100 properties. Because trust me, I'm going to buy 2 this year. That's my goal. I might actually buy just 1 or none, but it doesn't matter, because I'm constantly on the hunt, and I'm waiting for the perfect buck to walk into that crosshair before I fire. And so I might look at $100 or does, whichever gets you going, and I'm gonna look at 100 or maybe 150 or maybe just 25, whatever. But pick a number and say, I'm going to look at this many. And out of all those, you're going to analyze, and you're going to educate, and you're going to make relationships, and you're going to become the investor that you're playing the role of.
I like it. I'm assuming some of this is covered in the book that you're offering out there as well, the Blueprint book. So I'll make sure I send my text when the show is over, and we'll get it done.
Well,
Chris, thank you.
Catch you later.
Thanks, my friend. Appreciate you coming in. As always, good stuff. Chris Story, the man from Homer. We got to jump back into it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show continues. Your home for common sense, liberty-based. Well, I feel a little better. I don't know about you, but I feel a little better now that I've had a chance to discuss things with our friend Chris Story. So, yeah. I mean, I guess here's my thought. Here is my thought. And if you want to text Chris to get his booklet, again, his number 907-299-7653. You just text your email address to that number, and he will go ahead and send you an email with his little his 40-page booklet on that kind of real estate strategy. But I guess here's what I got out of just this most recent discussion is that, and again, likening it back to what the first segment of this hour was, which was, again, I don't want to revisit because it's kind of depressing when you think about it. But the idea of you are going to have to count on and provide for yourself. Somebody in the chat room said something that I thought was good. Herder in the chat room says, you just kind of throw up your hands. We live in an age where funding obligations by increasing debt is considered being responsible. I don't know. Seems like we can't kill the beast. It will have to run its course. Just do the best you can not to get trapped in it. And that's another fancy way of saying, basically that we all acknowledge the simple laws of arithmetic and mathematics. We understand that the things that are happening in this state, the things that are happening in this country, they're not sustainable, right? I mean, they can't continue. We can't continue in the same vein. Eventually, the wheels will come off the bus. We can do everything we can to try and stop it. But I mean, at some point, we're going to realize that, that it's going to continue. So at that point, we have to make a decision. And I'm not advocating to just throw your hands up in the air and walk away and say, well, that's it. I'm done with it. Whatever. I'm saying that with philosophies and ideas like what Chris is talking about, securing your own future, securing your own, wealth or prosperity, that's going to have to become the main focus of what you're doing. I decided a long time ago, back when I first decided probably 10 years ago, that I was really going to try and start steering away from national politics because, I basically had no influence on it. We had very little chance of changing things that were happening at the national level. I mean, other than obviously trying to elect good people there, but that other than that, there was really no way to fix it from where we were sitting, that all we could control is, our local stuff. And then that's when I started to focus on kind of more the local aspect of it. What's happening in my community, my city, my neighborhood, my state. Those are the things that I felt like I could do. But at the same time, I made a decision that regardless of what was happening and regardless of whether or not we were going to be able to make changes to what was going on, that I needed to find a way to basically stabilize and secure my own future, regardless of what's happening in the state or the country or, the worldwide economy or whatever. And that's when I really started to explore, some of these alternate ideas, things that Chris has talked about, other side hustles, diversifying my income, things like that. And it's been a pretty good journey. It's been hit or miss. Sure. Good things, got bad things. But I think that is what I'm coming away with today. And maybe that's not what Chris intended. Maybe that's not the position that he intended. But I'm just going to do the best that I can. I will still fight the fight. I'm not going to give up and retire to Louisiana or where, I'm not going to do anything. But I'm going to also at the same time put just as much effort into making sure that I secure my own and my family's future as I would in trying to stop the megalithic beast of bigger, badder government with no accountability and no adherence to the laws of mathematics or arithmetic. And it's kind of got to be that way. And I know that's the I know that in the the talk radio world, that's probably, we should just fight the fight, and that's all we should focus on, and that was kind of my eye-opening aha moment last year, was that I wanted to talk about more than just politics, because there is more to life than that. And so even though we are fighting the fight, we're trying to get these things done, we're going to continue to analyze and expose the problems and try to offer solutions. At the same time, we need to be planning in our own lives for any eventuality, right? Prepare for the worst, hope for the best. What's the worst? Well, a complete and total economic global collapse. That's the worst, right? that's the in this scenario, that's the worst. So how do we protect ourselves? How do we, we'll go back to look at other examples of this, the Great Depression, et cetera, and see where monies can be made, where fortunes can be made, where people can be protected, and, do your best. And so that's kind of what I'm taking away from Chris's lessons today is that I have to be able to take care of myself and my family, and I better be planning for that. Because, if you're not making a plan, then you're just kind of coasting along, bumping along the road. If you're just driving around aimlessly, that's, you need to have a plan and a destination and a map laid out as to what your route is going to be. And you better take the time to analyze where you're at and decide. Now, I'm 53 years old, and, I've got less time than somebody who's, in their 30s, who may be listening to this and saying, yeah, that makes sense. Well, do it now. Don't wait till you're 53. Don't wait till you're 48. Just do it now, wherever you're at. And if you're older than me, well, you still got some time. Just go get it done, and leave something for your families. You can't take it. Brian, Chris in the chat room just said, you can't take it with you. You can't take it with you when you pass. So spend. No, but I can pass it on to my children, and I can pass on the example to my children, and give them some stability in the future. If I do, maybe I can't pass it, I can't take it with me, but I can leave a legacy. There's a scripture or something that says something about, that woe be unto him who can't provide for his children's children, down to the third generation kind of thing. So I want to leave something so that my family can prosper no matter what's going on in the government. So we got to kind of think about that too. And I think what Chris brings up is a great example of that. Just my thoughts for the day. It's going to be interesting. All right. I guess that's it for today. We gotta go. We gotta get out of here. We got things to do and people to see and plans to make, blueprints to draw, right? Tomorrow, I don't know who we're going to have on the program. We'll have somebody. Or it'll just be me and you and some phone calls. How about that? That should be fun, too. Well, we'll figure it out. Be kind, love one another, live well. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. That's right. Worlds to conquer. Interesting, exciting people to meet and kill. I got things to do today. All right. Well, that took an interesting turn because I really was working myself up into a bit of a froth there in the first segment, because it is frustrating to watch what's going on and to understand and see what's going to happen based on past performance. It's indicative of future results. But at the same time, at some point, you got to pull the ripcord on that and divorce yourself from that and look at your own family and look at where you're at and say, I'm going to do my best to enjoy my life. I'll still fight the fight, but I'm going to do my best to protect myself and my family and those that I love and provide for that. It's going to be interesting. We may have a shower hour of power tomorrow. Depends. I don't know. I'm still waiting to hear back from Mike. We'll see what happens. But if nothing else, it'll be you and me, baby. You guys have a great day. Thanks for coming on board the Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.
Well,